So in part two, let's look at the NFC. So we are going to start on the NFC East. God help us all. Right, so let's quickly run through for last season. So we had the Super Bowl champions, the Philadelphia Eagles. We have the Washington Commanders. We have a little team called the Dallas Cowboys, and we have the New York Giants. Last season, Fly Eagles Fly. They won the division with a 14-3 record, followed by the surprise package of the season, which was Washington Commanders, and they had a 12-5 record. And then you had the Cowboys with 7-10, and you had the Giants 3-14. So, now, Eddie, be honest, be realistic. Who do you have to win the NFC East this season?
This is gonna be a very short one. It's the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, what are we even talking about? What are we doing here, right? What are we? I mean, this is a division that never has a repeat winner, right? In the last, I don't know, 15 odd years, you don't win the division and come back and win it again. It just doesn't happen. That's what we do in the NFC. Yes, this is how we roll. So listen, fly, Eagles, fly. They're gonna be on the ground a lot, next season. Let's just be clear about that. The Super Bowl, slump is a real thing, right? So I've just invented that one. The Super Bowl slump is a real thing. And listen, they went to the Super Bowl, Jalen Hurts, MVP, all of that. But let's look at the teams, right? Giants, right? I look at the Giants and they probably have the best defense in that division, right? They just don't have things happening in the offense, right? We don't know who's going to be the quarterback. Is it going to be Russell Wilson? Is it going to be Jameis Winston? Is it going to be Daxon Jards? I always feel like I say his name wrong. Whether it's Jackson Darts or Daxon Jards. And so I've made you think now.
Searing analysis as always.
So I think that if you can't go into the season not knowing who your quarterback's gonna be. I think that already puts you behind the eight ball. So we'll look at the Giants and say, if they do well, to not be last, I think that's an improvement on this season. Then you look at the Commanders, right? And we've talked about the sophomore slump, Caden Daniels. Um, Played very well, got a good coach, got some good weapons, Debo Samuel, Terry McLaurin, if they pay him. They've got a decent running game as well. And they will have a lot of confidence from getting to the NFC Championship last season. So they can make some noise. But I cannot see past the Dallas Cowboys winning that division. And the reason for me is Dak Prescott. It's got to be Dak Prescott. I know that it sounds almost blasphemous to say, especially after Jalen Hurts has won the MVP in the Super Bowl and also won a Super Bowl. But but for me, Dak Prescott is still the best quarterback in that division. And people look at Dak Prescott and they say he never does it in the postseason. But we're not talking about the postseason right now. We're talking about who's going to win the division. And when it comes to regular season, there is no other quarterback, probably other than Patrick Mahomes, that wins in the regular season just like Dak Prescott. So all of that, tells me that a healthy Dak Prescott, George Pickens, flying, CD Lamb flying, I think the Cowboys take that division. I think the Eagles take a step back. I don't see Saquon Barkley running for another 2,000 yards. And remember, we had this conversation during the season, and we're talking about the Ravens and saying, why can't the Ravens just embrace their identity the way the Eagles have? Because the Eagles started the season 2-2. Jalen Hurts was throwing all over the yard, and they just thought, well, hold on a second. We just traded for this guy, who's arguably one of the best running back. And then they set Saquon Barkley loose. And literally, Jalen Hurts would throw for maybe 20 times, in a game, hand the ball to Saquon Barkley and go get a cup of tea. And Saquon Barkley would just take over the game, come back after 200 yards and say, here you go, here's the ball. What are we doing next? So it was literally like that. I just can't see him doing that. I'm not saying that he's not going to be good, but to run the way that he did last season, I think that's going to be quite a challenging thing for him to repeat. So I think if you shackle Saquon Barkley, you shackle the Eagles. And I know they've got AJ Brown. I know they've got Devonta Smith, but I don't trust Jalen Hurts to be able to get the ball to them consistently without Saquon Barkley running the show. So that's why I've got the Dallas Cowboys.
I'm very impressed of the mental gymnastics you've done there, Eddie. So there's two things I agree on. Is that I don't think the Commanders will be as good as last season, only because they were so good last season, and I think they surprised so many people. Jaden Daniels, we're going to find out next season if he is the real deal,
Mhm.
right? Is he able to take that rookie season? Is he able to get a team to the playoffs and back-to-back seasons? I'd be amazed if they put up another 12-5 season. Right. I still think they'll be in the chance for the playoffs. Of course I do. But I don't think they'll be 12-5. I
Yeah.
also think the Cowboys will be better. I don't think the Cowboys will have a losing record. Right. I don't think, 7-10, it all went wrong, net points of minus 118. But I mean, they were tight in the division, 3-3 in the division rivalries. I mean, the Giants 0-6, we know, so we know they're out the we know they're going to be out the equation again. So I believe that the Cowboys are going to push the division. They're going to push the Eagles a lot more. I just really find it hard to. I think I'm not a Cowboys fan, so I'm not going to do the mental arithmetic that you are to try and basically put Cowboys to that. We are very different in our football fandom, aren't we? Really? I mean, I am just a very pessimistic Dolphins fan, a very pessimistic Sheffield Wednesday fan, a very pessimistic sport fan, really, or a realist, as I like to call it. You pie in the sky, everything. Anyway, so I mean, I'm just going to go. I'm going to have to stick with the Eagles on this. I think they are just if Dak Prescott a better quarterback than Hurts, you can certainly make the argument for that. Right? I'm not going to debate you on that one, but I think the Eagles are just a better team, all in all. But let's see how the Super Bowl um, let's see how winning the Super Bowl reacts to them.
Super
Right?
Bowl slum.
Are they still going to be a team of brotherly love? Who knows? They've still got the tush push. We can't forget that. That's still the brotherly shove is still part of their arsenal, despite what the well you campaigned for
Try
to
to
get
ban
rid
the
of.
tush push. Get
Try
it
to
out of
try.
here.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not football.
only because you can't bloody do it. Um, so yeah, I'm going to go for the Eagles. And again, just quickly looking at the betting odds as according to ESPN, as I said in part one. I don't know how up to date these are, but it certainly gives us an indication on where we think the lay lands. Again, they have Philly as the favourites minus 14.5. Washington plus 225 and Dallas some way low in third. So it looks like ESPN and these odd bats they are sleeping on the Cowboys
Yeah.
plus 600. But the Giants plus 3,000. So again, way out. So I'm pretty much doing what I've done in everything so far and just go for the favorites, it seems. So I'm going to go for the Eagles in this one. I just think you know, they're the better team. They're going to have some slump to fall away. So it's what it's all about, though, Eddie. Supporting your team. The word fan comes from fanatics. You know, I understand that. So, you do you. You do you. I will go fly, Eagles fly. I am wearing an Eagles cap, I think, today. I've just noticed America, although it's not Philadelphia Eagles, it's American Eagles. So at least feel like I'm representing the Eagles on this
And
podcast.
and of course I'm representing my Dallas Cowboys.
You're
So
always representing the Dallas Cowboys. You go to sleep in some kind of Dallas Cowboy merch. I'm not surprised if you went down the aisle for your wedding wearing like a Tony Romo sort of replica shirt at some stage. But anyway, let's digress and move on quickly to the NFC North. So the
ooh.
NFC North. So yes. Um so again, tough division last season. Three teams made it into the playoffs. So yeah, the Detroit Lions who got took it all the way. They were top seed last season, only to fall short against the Commanders. They had a 15-2. They had a 15-2 record. Right behind them with 14-3 was the Minnesota Vikings. A bit all changed there, certainly a quarterback level going into this season. You had the Green Bay Packers at 11-6, and then you had the Chicago Bears bringing up the rear with 5-12 with Caleb Williams' first season as the first choice draft pick at quarterback. So Whew, this one's a tough one to call again. Where do I mean, where do we even start with this one? Eddie, so obviously Lions won it last season, but it was a closer thing. Do you think they're going to be the team to beat again this season?
So I'm going to shock you with this one, because I think that I have a different winner for this division,
Chicago
right?
Bears. Very brave. Very
Not,
brave.
not that one. I'm not going to be that shocking. But I'll tell you why I'm not looking at the obvious names that people might think about. The first obvious name is Vikings. I know they had a great season last season. Sam Darnold basically became something else. He was Sam Marino, literally last season. And you've got a rookie quarterback who had just a few reps in preseason, JJ McCarthy, who's going to be starting for the Vikings. Now, don't get me wrong, Justin Jefferson is him. He is that guy. And I think that he would make any quarterback look good. And I think that JJ McCarthy is going to look good because of Justin Jefferson, but he's still a rookie, and that division is notoriously tough. I think that there's going to be a lot of growing pains, for JJ McCarthy, coming into the league. They're probably going to need 4 or 5 games for him to like get his feet under the table. And in the NFL, it's only the Bengals that can start horribly in the first couple of games and then take off. And the Chiefs, they can do that. But I don't see other teams giving everybody else a head start and then catching up, towards the end. And that's why for me, I don't look at the Vikings and think that they're going to be as good as they were last season, just because of all the things that have changed. And then you look at the Lions, right? Who's going to be everyone's favorite to win that division? But they've lost their 2 offensive coordinators, and that means something, right? It always means something. It's very hard to just roll in with 2 new offensive coordinators and then go ahead and just as if nothing happened, especially when those 2 offensive coordinators were Aaron and Ben Johnson, right? These are 2 coordinators that have immediately gotten jobs. So Ben Johnson have gone to the Bears, so he's gone within that division. So he's going to be taking the magic sauce plus all the cheat codes to the Bears. Right. So that game is going to be different. It's a little bit like, when you have, a player that leaves a team and goes to another team that is fiercely contested. And you know what always happens when they play each other? The player always scores, right? And then goes to celebrate, to just kind of show that I'm still valuable. So I think Ben Johnson is going to be doing spoilers, going to be playing spoilers in that division. He's going to be taking points off, because it's a division that he knows. He's been in the Lions, plotting how to beat the Bears, plotting how to beat the Vikings, plotting how to beat the Packers. And now he's gone to the Bears, taking all of that, intel with him. So I think the Lions will take a step back. I know that in our previous video, I did say that they're going to win the whole NFC. I still think that they would do that, but they're probably not going to do it, as division winners. I'm going to go with the Green Bay Packers. And I go with the Green Bay Packers because I think they have a really, really good coach. And what he's been able to do with the little that he's got, with no real star players, he's gotten them to the playoffs a number of times. He's gotten them into double-digit wins, in the league a number of times. And so I now look at it and say, the Packers were 11-6, and a lot of times they looked pretty good when they played. Of course, 2 seasons ago, they absolutely shellacked the Dallas Cowboys in the playoffs. So I think that they're going to steal points. They're going to steal 2 or 3 games from other people in the division. They're going to take games away from the Vikings. No question without that. So if they finish 11-6 and they take 1 or 2 games from the Vikings and the Lions, that immediately puts them at 13 wins. And they take a game from, somewhere else, So I think that they win that division, the Green Bay Packers.
You said you were going to surprise me. I actually have the Packers to win that division myself. They were kind of my non-favorites who I'm voting for. I think what's going to be key in this division is so they were 4 games, 4 wins different than the Lions,
Yeah.
right? And the Lions they were absolutely balling last year, weren't they? But if you look at the divisional records, I keep coming back to this because if the Packers can improve their divisional record this coming season, that's going to make a huge difference.
Yeah.
So Lions were 6-0 in the division. So Packers absolutely ran the board down in the NFC North. They beat everybody.
Yeah.
The Packers were 1-5. The Bears were 1-5. So the Packers were poor in their divisional games, right? If they can turn some of those around, if they can pick up a win against the Vikings, if they can pick up a win against the Lions, if they can win both their games or targeting both their games against the Bears, but they were 5-0 in non-conference games. So if they can keep that same record in the non-conference games against teams from the AFC, that they could be coming around. They should be pushing the Lions to win this. I agree with everything you said in terms of they've got a really good coach, they've got a really up and coming QB, and I think it's time that he doesn't become up and coming. He needs to be the present. He needs to be the here and now, and I think he could be. I agree that the Vikings probably have made too many changes to really be as good as they were last year. Again, similar to what we talked about with the Commanders, the Vikings were very much a surprise package of last season. Nobody saw that.
Nah, at
Nobody
all.
saw
No
Sam
one saw
Darnold
them
coming
coming.
in, taking the snaps of right. This is going to be a 14-3 team. Fair play to them. Fair play to Darnold. He resurrected his career. It's a really good feel good story. The Vikings last season. It wouldn't surprise me if they even propped up the division because I think the Bears will be better.
Mm,
Caleb Williams. I mean, rookie season, first draft pick, 5 wins, certainly in the could do better category. I think
yeah,
this season he will do better. Will they
yeah.
have a winning record? Probably not. But I think the Vikings may not have a winning record either. Lions again, look, were fantastic last season. It'll be interesting to see how they respond. Hugely disappointed when they
Yeah,
lost to the Commanders.
yeah,
They were the top seed. They were the team that many people thought would be in the Super Bowl, but they
yeah,
didn't make it.
yeah.
So they've got a big disappointment to get over. So, like you, I'm also going for the Green Bay Packers. Um, so let's move on then to the NFC South. So the South, yeah, an odd one to call. So you've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah,
They were the only team who got into the playoffs last season from this division with a 10-7 record. And every other team in the division had a losing record. Atlanta Falcons were 8-9. Carolina Panthers were 5-12. And the New Orleans Saints were also 5-12. So not really a heavy hitting division this year. And I don't want to say it could be anybody's, but you look at this division and you think, okay, which team are going to get into the playoffs and be one and done in the playoffs? That's kind of what it looks like. So the Buccaneers took it pretty much at a canter, it feels like. But can you see anybody knocking them off this season, Eddie?
I do. I do. This is a division that I have my eye on. And I'll tell you when we're kind of looking at overall in the conference. I've got my eye on this division because they suck.
Yeah.
And it's not because they start with the letter S, which is also the NFC South. But I just look at this division and I'm thinking to myself, you got the Saints, no quarterback. Drew Brees just retired. They've got Tyler Shocks, a rookie head coach, also there. You've got all the makings of a team that this year we're just gonna see what we've got. We're gonna see whether we've got a quarterback or we need to go back into the draft again next season. So I feel for Kellen Moore because this is a very tough job. I don't know how, he's gonna pull this off in a division that probably, you know, it's gettable. You look at that division and you think, I could actually win this division if I could win a couple of games. And he plays for a team who are used to eating caviar, right? They're used to the good stuff in life, so the Saints, going through hard times just feels very, very different, after all the years of having Drew Brees, as well. So I think that's going to be tough. Panthers, Bryce Young, you expect him to continue to trend. I think he's going to be able to pick up a few more wins this season. He already started showing promise. He had a bit of a purple patch, as we say, for strikers in football, where he was going through teams and he was not just sneaking out wins, he was very convincing in those wins. A lot of those wins came in the latter part of the season because, at some point they were trending to be number one overall pick. And then they started winning games and ruining their draft position. So you've got the Panthers doing that. But for me, I think that the team that's going to win this division is the Falcons. The Falcons, for me, have got an interesting, and they've been quietly, building the team. You've got Bijan Robinson, who is the legit running back in the league. Now you've got a quarterback, Michael Penix Jr., who is a little bit strange, right? They get Kirk Cousins, they give him, fully guaranteed money. Then they turn around and go draft his replacement, which is probably, on the surface is what you want to do. But at the same time, it doesn't look very well. It's a bit like, going proposing, to and say, hey, will you be my wife? And then she says yes, and then you turn around and then you go get a mistress. It was almost that kind of weird dynamic where Kirk Cousin is coming in.
That's not what you. That's not what you did. That's not how you do. Okay, well that's a custom up here in Sheffield. But anyway.
So, I mean, it was just one of those things where everyone was like, are you kidding me? You just gave all that money to Kirk Cousins and then you go ahead and draft, another quarterback. But it seems like that might pay off because Kirk Cousins had a very tough season. At some point, they were like, hey, we need to see what we've got with this rookie. And they brought him in and he won a couple of games and he looked good, winning them. He was throwing the ball, he was using his legs, and it seemed like the team were rallying towards him. So I don't see them not starting him this season. And if they start him, I think that they've got the potential to actually go ahead and win that division. The Bucks would always be the Bucks, but you've got an aging Mike Evans now, right? There you've got Baker Mayfield that he does need, someone to be his go-to person, right? So I'm going with the Falcons. I like the Falcons in that division, and I think the Falcons will win.
It's an interesting one. I agree. This is the division that's certainly hard to call. I think the Saints have been thrown into all sorts of chaos with Derek Carr's retirement,
Yeah.
right? And I think that I mean, Derek Carr was a good, solid QB. He's had a decent career, but to lose a starting quarterback through injury, it would have thrown everything offshore. And again, they've got Tyler Shows given a starting QB. I don't see anything for them other than last place. I'm I'm intrigued by the Panthers. I'm interested in how Bryce Young does. Again, someone who was drafted really high at QB, who just was getting pelters because again, that was just a typical QB that got drafted into a rubbish team and just getting absolutely hit every single week because he didn't have an offensive line to provide him any protection. But last season we started to actually see the type of things, the type of stuff that he can bring. So I'm curious to see how these guys go. You're right with the Buccaneers. They've got Baker Mayfield, good quarterback. I'm pleased he's got a home. Again, the fact that he made it to the playoffs is another feel-good story, really. But the Falcons, again, I'm tending to agree with you with the Falcons. I'm not going to agree with you with the Falcons just to make this interesting, and I'm going to go for the Buccaneers. But because the reason why I say the Falcons, so the reason why I'm not saying the Falcons is because of the quarterback situation. Now, Penix Jr., I think sitting on the bench last season was probably the best move. And we've talked about it. Yeah, we talked briefly in the last part about Mahomes, didn't we? And the fact that he didn't have a rookie year because his rookie year was watching Alex Smith. And then he came in the second year and he's become the elite level quarterback that he's become. That for me is the way that you should treat rookie QBs. And for someone like Penix Jr., now it was the way that they did it was odd. You're paying Kirk Cousins a lot of money and then you draft high. Again, it doesn't seem to quite fit in. But again, I don't know Kirk Cousins. I think there's a lot of talk with him on the Netflix documentary.
Yeah, the
About that.
quarterback.
So it'll be interesting when I get around to watch that to see how it's done because you've seen it in Green Bay when they brought in Love to sit and say behind Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers just did not care. He wasn't going to train
Yeah,
the next generation. Kirk Cousins might have been completely different. The
yeah.
way that Fitzpatrick was for Tua at the Dolphins.
Mm,
Yeah, Fitzpatrick wants to play, but actually he understood his assignment really is to help Tua get to that next level to be a starting quarterback. So I think that could work really well for the Falcons. And if it does work well, they are going to win that division. Right.
yeah.
However, I'm just going to be contrary just to keep things interesting and say it won't. um, and I think the Buccaneers will probably will go and take it. But I think these sort of divisions where you've got four teams who aren't particularly good
Mm,
are probably the most fascinating league
yeah.
divisions to watch.
They are.
I mean, just looking at again some of the stats, it was so close. Buccaneers and the Falcons both had a 4-2 record in the division. So Panthers and Saints had a 2-4 record. But the Buccaneers, despite the fact that they won the division, they were 2-3 against non-conference.
Mm,
So they didn't pick up any victories in the against AFC oppositions. They did well against the rest of the conference. They were 8-4. Decent net points, 117, very attacking. So that was scored a lot of points. So yeah, I'll stick for the Buccaneers just to be sort of slightly contrary to yourself. But again, it'll be interesting to see. Certainly down in Atlanta. So let's move on then to the final division of the NFC. I think it's the final division. Yes, it is. Look at the NFC West, where we have the LA Rams and the Seattle Seahawks. We have the Arizona Cardinals and we have the San Francisco 49ers. So last season, the Rams made the playoffs despite having an identical record to the Seahawks, both being 10-7, but the Rams made it and the Seahawks didn't. We had the Cardinals at 8-9, and we had the 49ers who had a disastrous season for them with a record of 6-11. So again, this is quite an interesting one to see where this one's going to go because everybody knows that the 49 or thinks the 49ers cannot have as bad a season as they did last season. And then the Rams and the Seahawks were tied. I mean, but I said going back to we looking at those net points, the Rams were -19. So they actually gave away more points than they actually scored, but they still won the division. How do you see this one going?
This used to be one of the toughest divisions in the NFC. At one point when you had Russell Wilson, you had Matthew Stafford, and then you also had, whoever it was at 49ers, where it was Jimmy Garoppolo or, whoever that, current quarterback at the time was. But this is one of those ones. There was this popular saying when I was growing up, the rich also cry. And and this is effectively what has happened to the NFC West, right? They've kind of gone from riches to rags, so to speak. Um, I think that this is the division that you're probably going to get a last to first situation with the 49ers, because I think there's a lot of arguments that the 49ers position was really a false one. They had a lot of things go against them, in the league last season. And it only takes one or two things. The NFL is a very hard league, right? It's very hard to win games. We're talking about the Bengals scoring 30 points and still losing four games, right? You could score that many points and still lose. A fumble, a kick return that goes wrong. It's just so many things that can go wrong in the NFL game, which is why we love it so much. And Brock Purdy, has shown that he's capable working within the Kyle Shanahan system and producing results. Now, he had an absolutely dreadful time last season, but he didn't have his Avengers. Everyone was down and out. And I think Ayuk is probably still injured. We don't know whether he's completely fit to come back yet. Christian McCaffrey was injured, but I hear that he's, recovering and would probably be a starter. And you read Christian McCaffrey before Saquon and Derrick Henry exploded was arguably the best running back in the league, right? And I think you don't lose that. So I think they're going to climb on his back this season, and they're going to run hard. Remember, the Rams actually started the season, I think they were like 1-4 or 1-5, and then they just went on a crazy run, right? And getting themselves into the playoffs and nearly knocking off the Eagles. Now, we talked about this when we talked about, the Rams earlier on and say everything depends on, Stafford staying, healthy, right? You've got to keep him healthy. If you keep him healthy, you've got a chance. Um, but I think, like, of course, every team needs their starting quarterback to be healthy. But you just feel like when you have an aging quarterback, it just feels even more fragile, right? He could be healthy, but even a 70% health might not be enough, right, with an aging quarterback. So you need 100% to go your way. So I'm going to go with the 49ers to win this division. I think they're going to come back. I think they're going to have an easier schedule because they were last, and when you're last, you tend to get an easier schedule the next season, at least on paper, comparatively. But I think that they've got age on their side, the 49ers. So I'm going to go with the 49ers to win this division.
Yeah, and I think the odds back you up on that because again, we didn't really talk about the odds when we looked at the South, but the ESPN odds, although again, nobody is odds on favorite, but they do have the 49ers going from worst to first with plus 150. But it's close. They've got Rams at plus 175, they've got the Cardinals at plus 450 and the Seahawks at plus 550. Which for me seems about right in terms of it's probably gonna be a two-horse race between the 49ers and between the Rams. Um, Too much upheaval at Seahawks. I imagine that. I mean, we talked about Sam Darnold when we talked about the Vikings. Fantastic redemption arc for him last season.
Yeah.
Um, do I think he can go into Seattle and do the same again? Probably not. Uh, Kyler Murray, Arizona Cardinals again, another good young quarterback, but I don't think he's got enough weapons to sort of carry around him and really put pressure on these two teams. Now, I said 49ers were dreadful last season. Absolutely dreadful. So under where they should be. But the Rams were fine. Again, I think it could be between the two. If you're going to push me, I'm going to say the Rams again, purely just to be contrary between the two of us. Just, we're not really, these aren't part of our wild predictions, our weekly scoring predictions yet. But, if I get most of these right, I will be talking about it at the end of the season. Don't you worry. If you do better, then the file will be accidentally deleted. But no, I'll say the Rams. I think they they've got a strong team. We've got Stafford is obviously um, a good solid quarterback. He's got a few weapons around him. So I'll go for the Rams just to win the division again. But it's going to be close and really can't call it between the 49ers and the Rams. Um, okay, so there we have it. That's our picks for the NFC.